Hello everyone, welcome to Figure Drawing Basics Part 31 of Art Lounge. I'm your host. I will be starting in just a second, but first I would like to do a quick overview of the Patreon page. This is it, y'all. I'm not going to take too much time. You could check out the page. I have it posted on the Twitch channel. You can check out the link, click on that, and just read through, see which tier is for you. Just gonna do a brief overview of it. The tier 1 is the official patron tier. You get access to the Discord server. You will also get your patron name listed in the credits. I'm gonna start doing credits at the end of the stream, and as a thank you, you guys are gonna be listed there. So then we got the tier 2 access patron. For this one, you will get early access to finished pages and exclusive content. And what that means is, for exclusive content, it's only going to be posted on Patreon, no other social media. So you guys will have that VIP pass. You also get work in progress, behind scenes. In the future, you will have access to Discord server. Pretty much everybody from all social media can come together to this Discord server, that specific channel, the general channel, and all the people from the different tiers as well can interact with each other, get to know each other, build an interesting community, share ideas, thoughts, and expression. You will also get your name listed in the credits and be part of the Patreon community. Then we got tier 3, which is the critique submission tier. It's $15 per month. You guys can do it once. You could submit once and cancel later. But for now, there are no caps to how many times you could submit to through the month. So you could work on it, then resubmit it, have a critique done on stream live. And that's going to be held every Friday. So instead of the usual schedule, it's going to be the critique session, and that's going to be going on for 2 hours. So I could do multiple critiques on that day. But yeah, there's some more information on there. Just read through it, see what other info is there as well. Then we got the next tier, which is the Kickstarter patron. Here, you guys, for $25 per month, and again, you could just do this once, submit it once, and cancel later. Unfortunately, I don't think that Patreon does one-time submissions at the moment, or one-time subscription. So yeah, for this tier, you will have a high-resolution digital painting of you. I encourage you guys to wear masks, put makeup on, glasses, express facial expressions, hats, accessories, that sort of thing. I think it'll make the stream fun. It'll create an interesting profile photo for you that you could use for other social media platforms. And you could just send it to somebody close to you. It's yours. You could do whatever you want with it. After I'm done with it, I'll send you that file. Then you will also get all the previous benefit tiers as well. Then we got the next one, which is a tier 4 artist promotion. This is for intermediate and advanced artists. There's a lot of info on here, so I highly encourage you guys to check this out if this interests you and read through it. There's some requirements there, and as always, ask me any question you got. I'll be happy to answer you and fill you in on any other detail. You can also check out in the collections tab, there is the highlights folder, and in that highlights folder is the Patreon page launch and schedule a change stream, where I go into detail for every single tier. You guys can get a better understanding of what it's really about, what each tier is really about. Then we got the last one, which is the tier 5 private tutoring. $65 per month. You get 4 videos per month and a PSD file. So I'm going to curtail the video specifically for you and just give you step-by-step instruction, critique your work, show you where you can improve. And I'm also gonna assign you homework for the week, so that way when you are done, I can send you another video based on that. So just more content to work off of and have a progressive sort of session each time. So yep, you get the 4 videos per month. You get the PSD file that I'm going to be working on. Each time I work on your piece, there's going to be a PSD file, and I'm going to upload that for you. You'll also get an exclusive Discord channel dedicated just to you. So it's going to be between me and you. You can leave me comments, you can leave me questions, you can leave me your progress there. And it's going to be private. You also have a tier 5 members only Discord channel. It is limited to 15 people. So you guys can interact with each other, get to know each other, and kind of have like an exclusive channel. But you will also have access to the general channel, as I mentioned, the channel where pretty much everybody from all social media platforms come together. From all the tiers, they come together and just hang out. And as well as all the other previous tiers as well. Whoops. So that pretty much does it, guys. I'm not gonna go way too much into the detail. As mentioned, you guys can check out this Patreon page on the Twitch channel. And yeah, with that said, I'm gonna start the drawing basics class. All right, y'all. So I did run into some issues last night, actually, and this is why it's taken me a little bit to prep for this. The stand that I was using for the camera ended up breaking off the wall. I have it mounted onto the wall, and it was like a whole project for me to get it back together. So just want to make sure that you guys get a good view, since things have shifted a little bit. So this is going to be the last few pages. I'm probably going to finish up this page today. Hopefully, actually, I'm going to do a little bit of both. A little bit on here and some here as well. And I'm going to show you guys the pages in the entire sketchbook as a goodbye to the sketchbook. It's been a long run. I'm glad it's actually covered, and I'm going to be starting something new. But before I jump into it, I'd like to do a quick review, as quick as possible, because I did end up starting a little bit later than I expected. So I'm not going to get into too much detail about it. Just a quick note here, this is available on the Patreon page. So you guys can actually, starting in tier 2, you will have access to all the work that I've been uploading, and you guys can download this and pretty much use it for whatever you'd like. You could download it and have it as your digital file side by side when you're doing digital work, or you print it and have it side by side with you when you're doing traditional work. And so that way you can use it as a reference. You could copy it, which I highly suggest. Try to copy it as often as much as possible. Have it be your, let's say, when you're exercising, you're doing your stretches before you start doing the heavy lifting, have this be your stretches. Get more and more familiar with these proportions, so that way your eye just gets used to all these measurements and seeing the body in proportion. So eventually, just like when you were learning the alphabet, you don't even have to think about it. You don't have to recite it. It just naturally happens, So if you make this your regular exercise, if you make this your regular routine of drawing the body over and over again, you're going to get some great results in a shorter period of time. So before I jump into it, let's just quickly review very important points. Starting with practicing your highlights, midtones, and shadows. It's a perfect opportunity for you guys to train yourselves to get into good habits. And by good habits, I mean drawing lightly. That's a very, very important lesson. You don't want to brush past it or brush it off and just be like, whatever, it's not that important. It's extremely important because it helps you save time in the long run and just in general the drawing process. And it also makes it an enjoyable process. When you press hard on the pencil, when you give it the death grip, when you press hard on the paper, all that creates a very rigid sort of experience in drawing. You feel tense, you're trying to get all the lines down, and if you make a mistake, having to erase it becomes a whole other problem. You're seeing it still on the paper, it's ingrained into the paper, and you could even feel as you're making lines next to it or over it how you kind of have like this bump on the paper. And it really does make your hand rigid. It makes your lines rigid. When you're doing this, you're blocking your view of the entire image, so it's harder to judge proportion, it's harder to judge distance between objects. When you're drawing the hand, for example, you want to make sure that you see the entire figure so that you could see how far you're drawing. Is it too big, too long, too wide, that sort of thing. So keeping it at a distance, you could even see it in this example. This, as opposed to this, it really does change the entire game. You're able to see more, you have more of a free-flowing sort of vibe. It just makes the experience more pleasant in general. And also, the very obvious one is that when you erase, or when you choose different lines, for example, when you start out with like light sketch, drawing the figure, drawing your boundaries, it becomes less problematic for you if you need to erase them later on, or even during the process of sketching things. They're not visible there, and sometimes that is and most of the time that's a great thing, because you could get a little bit, especially in the beginning if you're learning, you can get a little bit overwhelmed by all the lines around. You don't know which one is right, what to pick. You're still trying to organize things in your head, and you're seeing this really like messy sort of result. So when you draw lightly, you can choose specific lines by pressing down a little bit harder on them to kind of pop them out, make them distinguishable from the rest of the lines. That's another benefit to it. And it also allows you to just make sure everything kind of fits within whatever you're working on, whether it's a page, whether it's a panel. As I mentioned, keeping that distance allows you to really have like a scope vision of everything that's going on, everything that you've created so far. So multiple benefits to it. That's one good habit. The other good habit is, again, trying to practice these shading techniques, and that allows you to also control your pressure on the pencil, on the paper, starting out really light and gradually getting darker and darker. And you could get darker by just going over the same area multiple times with the same amount of pressure. You don't have to start pressing harder. In fact, you just keep doing over and over again, and it creates that darker tone that you're looking for. And that also helps you kind of maintain this sort of loose process. It's a very simple exercise. It's kind of like relaxing. You're not really doing anything complicated, but you're reaping all these benefits from it. As I mentioned, you're understanding shading technique. You're allowing the gradation to be smoother as well. That's one of the things you want to do is create that smooth transition from highlight to midtone to shadow, which brings you results like this. You want to avoid results like that, where it's such a stark difference between all the shades. You got your highlights, obviously, you got your midtones, obviously, and you got your shadows. That really flat, it still makes the image flat. Despite you having these gradations, it's still a very flat image. Whereas if you blend it, or if you control the pressure throughout your shading, you get results like this, or like this, or like that. It allows the object to pop out more when you blend all of these shadows between each other. So multiple benefits to it. All these excellent habits that you could keep in mind, that you could even correct yourself because you're doing something so simple. You're not overly focused on doing something complicated that requires you to compare and contrast and adjust and do all these other things. And in that process, you kind of forget, you become so focused on trying to build out the anatomy, for example, that you forget, I'm supposed to keep it light. I'm supposed to not press down on a pencil or keep it too close to the tip. I'm supposed to sketch things out, or just make sure that the process is very loose in the beginning. You tend to forget it when you're overwhelmed with all that information, especially if you're just starting out to draw. So you want to avoid making a habit of doing the opposite, of making all those bad mistakes, or acquiring all those bad habits. And these exercises allow you to practice that and keep it in mind every time before you sit down to draw. And the more you do it, the more ingrained it becomes. You just kind of start doing that from get-go. You could also use it to practice your basic shapes. As I mentioned, that's a very important shape. You have to make sure that when you first start out drawing the head, that the circle is actually a circle. It's not oblong, it's not deformed, it's not distorted, it's not it's not skewed in any way. You want to make sure that you perfect that. It's a really important shape, and it's the basis for the head, basically. You start out with that, you create the cup shape for the chin area, which I will show you in a few minutes. So here is the unit of measurements, as I mentioned. I highly encourage you guys to check out this page on Patreon, so that way you can start practicing and actually copying all these things. And as you copy, you will understand how it's easy. The fact that the head is pretty much 4 heads. The body from the top of the head to the groin area is 4 heads, and then from the groin area down to the feet, it's another 4. A more simplified version, and then you could see all these other examples that show you other areas that you kind of break down those 4 heads into 2. Knowing where, let's say, the chest ends, and how far it goes down until you hit the groin area, and then just seeing examples of how other parts of the body are measured using the head as well. So it's a great page. It's really important. It should be like the basis to all your stretches, right? All your exercises prior to getting into more complicated stuff. So I highly encourage you guys to check that out. So that's pretty much it. I don't want to get too much into detail of all the other things listed there. There's this important page as well, which I will be uploading onto Patreon, and that way you guys can practice this and take a look and remind yourself. Again, you could print it and have it in your sketchbook, like staple it to a page there. That way you can always refer to it. When you're sitting down to draw anywhere, you could just be like, okay, let me check out all these other important concepts. So with that said, y'all, let me get into the head. So as I was talking about, the circle being a very important shape, let's start out with exactly that. And I just want to show you guys the step-by-step process, basically. So it's important to draw the line down the middle. You get to see how well things are turning out on each side. And especially it just allows you to center the face. If you don't include that, you might draw the eye here and the other eye over here, and then notice that things are looking kind of warped. Whereas when you draw that line down the middle, you can really tell, like, well, how close is the eye to this line? How close is the other eye to this line? You can draw the nose and you can say, okay, it's centered on the face. It's not way too high, way too low, or any of that. It's right where it's supposed to be. And also just it allows you to use it as a unit of measurement as well. There are parts of the body where it requires you to measure half the head. So when you draw that line down the middle, you could do that, and you can use that as a unit of measurement for other parts that you're trying to nail. So just side-by-side examples. This is your framework. This is your these are your, let's just say, your beams. When you're starting to build a building, you're not going to just start right away laying down the bricks and designing the interior. You first have to make sure that the building is stable. So you lay these beams down, not only stable, but also give yourself some parameters to work in. You only have so much supplies. You want to make sure that you're not building way out of its limit. So this is the same idea. You're giving yourself a limit. You want to make sure you're not drawing way out of bounds with it, and then find out that things are really deformed and distorted. So these lines give you that guidance, that limitation as well. Like, I know that the mouth is supposed to be here, and it's supposed to be on this line, basically, to ensure that it looks right, it looks proportionate. So just as an example, so the first line is more of like your eyebrow area. The second line is where your eyes are. And the distance between eyes is typically an eye width. So between this and this eye, it's about an eye width of a difference. And you also want to make sure that you're not drawing the eyes incredibly close to the other side, to where the ears are. That can make your image look distorted. Another really important one, and I mention this very often, you want to avoid having the gap between the eye and the nose being incredibly wide. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that that gap is just right, not too high, not too low. but I would say having it a little bit higher is better than having it being a little bit lower. Having it being a bit higher is more realistic, whereas it being really low ends up making your image look distorted and kind of breaks that fourth wall, between the work and the viewer. Like the viewer could already tell, like, oh, this isn't real, or if this isn't convincing, and they just kind of disengage from the image. Whereas the more accurate it is, the more engaged the person is and looks at the work longer, or becomes more involved with the image. So as you notice, you got the ears. They're right about at the same height as the eyebrows. And as I'm going through this, you guys can see how important this middle line is. It really does make sure everything kind of lines up with each other. If that line isn't there, you might start the mouth a little bit more to the right or the left, whereas it really should be centered. That dip in your lip should really center with the nose. It's almost as if that dip is meant for the nose to connect to it. If you think of like Tetris, and if this was going down, the nose would fit into that groove in the mouth. It's a strange way to just kind of have a better understanding, or just like remember that's an important detail. Like you don't want the mouth to be going towards the left or the right side in a straight shot like this. And just play around with this yourself, try to understand these principles. Like remember that the nostril, tip of the nostril, or where it starts or ends depending on which direction. But this point and the corner of the eye should not be far away from each other. It shouldn't be a huge gap. So sit down and practice this, just draw the head as many times as possible. Play around with that. Notice how also the distance between the eyebrow and the top eyelid isn't wide either. That creates a different face expression. It portrays a different emotion, and if you do it a little too high, it kind of looks weird. It doesn't look right. Now, something I mentioned before, a lot of you could say, well, why do I have to draw realistically? Like, I just want to draw cartoons, or I want to draw anime, or, I want to draw something more in simple form. And, you're free, of course, to do all that. It's good to draw in general, but I think that you will benefit from all this, and it really improves your drawing quality by drawing from life, by practicing to see detail, by practicing and understanding all these principles. They lend a hand to your imagination, and the drawings that come out from your imagination, it improves them. It makes them look better. It makes your lines look better, more confident, because you've really honed your ability to draw these features. You really spent a lot of time and focus, and you corrected yourself. Whereas the less of that you practice, the less you're willing to make corrections. You know, you're just jumping into doing something that you've always done, and you're not really learning anything new. You're not pushing yourself to the next level. You're kind of staying in a comfort zone, and you want to avoid doing that. That's something that isn't really beneficial to any artist, even people who are more intermediate. If once they stop learning, their work that kind of starts to get stifled or becomes redundant in a way. You want to challenge yourself and be able to see things differently as often as possible, so that way your images could be more interesting, more I guess have more character to them as well. You know, and what I mean is when you're drawing the hand rather than drawing popsicle sticks, you know, you're actually taking the time to study all the lines that create the fingers, and including the knuckles and all this other stuff lends a hand into your other drawings that don't even have to do with any of that. Your line variation becomes richer. You know, there's more variety to it. There's more character to it because you've actually studied all those things. You know, it kind of loosens up your arm, or it makes it more flexible rather, because you're making all these different type of lines. Whereas if you just stick to simple forms and simple lines, you're just constantly maintaining that. You know, but enough about that. Oh, and another thing is, it makes you practice more. You know, if you sit down and you draw something simple, let's say you draw a vase, right? You could fudge it, you could do certain things about it, and it'll still look good. It'll look all right. It's not going to look like it's deformed, or it very much could be the shape of the vase. But if you were to try to do that with a human figure, you know, if you were copying, let's say, from a photo, or you were copying from real life, you know, drawing from real life, a person, it requires you to really focus, and it requires you to make the right lines and dedicate yourself to like accuracy in order to capture the likeness. So you can't fudge things there. If you don't focus on making sure that the eyes are on the same line, it's gonna look bad. You know, it's gonna look deformed. It's gonna be very apparent that enough effort wasn't put into it. Whereas, as I was mentioning with the vase, you can kind of get away with it. You could take certain shortcuts and still it'll look right. So it just kind of prevents you from challenging yourself more. Whereas drawing from the human figure, drawing from practicing anatomy, all that stuff creates more interesting lines, more interesting understanding, and enriches your visual library in a sense, and your flexibility in your hand. So multiple benefits to it. I'm going to move on to a more detailed version of it, which I kind of got into it on the one above, but it never hurts to do it again. Again, I'm doing very light sketching of everything. Personally, I like to do all the different guidelines. The ones for the eyebrow, the one for the eyes, the one for the nose, where the nose ends, the mouth, to just have better understanding, better guidance in a sense. And that technique that I mentioned, studying the relationship between objects, for example, the corner of the eye and the nostril, the bottom of the lip and the chin. You don't want to have it too low, the lip, that is the bottom of the lip. You don't want to be too low, and you don't want it to be too high. You want to get it in the right position. And these are ideal forms. Of course, people's face varies and changes, but again, you're building up. You're building up your abilities to draw, rather than trying to get all the different types of variations of the human body and people's faces and that sort of thing. Like, you're just trying to increase your understanding of proportion, balance. So it's good to start with some sort of standard, so this is just like the standard of the human figure. And as you draw more from real life, and as you draw more from like photos, you'll start to notice that despite them being different, the people's faces and features are different. There's still a fundamental I want to say a fundamental truth to all of them. Like, for example, the fact that all those parts of the face are centered. The nose having to be centered with the lips, the eyes having an eye with distance from each other. And that variation really comes from subtle details, like how the nostril is shaped, and the lips, the lines on the lips, and how they're shaped. Just minute little things, adjusting them here and there, changes the face, makes it look like a totally different person. And that's something that you understand more from just practicing drawing the human figure, practicing drawing the human face. So this time around, I'm adding the hair, actually. And here's an important little detail as well. The hair, it doesn't exactly sit on top of the headline. It forms more over it. It's not inside the shape of the head, which sometimes people do. They start using the top of the head as like the closing of the hair, in a sense. That is as high as the hair will go, and that's a mistake, because it really shrinks the head, in a sense. Our hair gives our head more height, and you guys could see that here. Right here is the line for the head when I drew the circle, and the hair rests on top of it with a gap between those lines. So it's just a really important tool that studying the space difference between objects is a very important rule. As I mentioned, you start to notice it when it comes to the corner of the eye and the nostril, and pretty much in a lot of other parts of the drawing, you'll start to see how it really is a very important tool in order to achieve accuracy. I've been going over it so often that kind of makes it look like he has eyeshadow. I'm going to change something just so you guys could see. So this doesn't look too bad, right? But I'm going to change, and it kind of gives it the face more of a youthful look. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the eyes higher, and you guys will see how that changes the face. And if you notice it now, the face has a little bit more of an adult look to it. Right? Whereas before, he kind of resembled more of like a teenager, maybe a kid in his like 15 or like 16 years old age. Whereas moving up a little bit higher changed the face expression, changed the person kind of to more of an adult look. Just to demonstrate how important that detail is, ensuring that the gap between the nostril and the corner of the eye isn't too close, isn't too far up. Now if it was to go any higher than this, it would start to look, it wouldn't even start to look any, it would start to deteriorate into like an unrealistic territory. The person would just start to look weird. They wouldn't look older, it would just look kind of deformed. And same thing for the chin area, actually. The wider it is, the more adult the face starts to look. The more of a cup shape it is, the younger the person looks. So let's do another one real quick. And I'm going to show you guys what happens when you move the eyes too high up. I'm going to make sure to draw things very similar. It is going to be side by side to demonstrate. Draw the line down the middle. And as this is a perfect example, once I draw the line down the middle, you could see how different this part of the chin is from this one. This one is going further up and it's kind of pointy, whereas this one curves. So that gives me an opportunity, like, I notice it now, I could correct it. All while keeping it loose, not pressing too hard. Gonna draw the mouth here. Now the distance of where the nostril is going to be is really going to be the biggest difference between the two. And you guys be the judge. Take a look and see. Does it look weird? Does it look like an adult? Does it look like a normal, regular person? So you can see how different it looks. It looks kind of elongated. It doesn't look right. There's something off about it, right? Again, this is further away from style and just trying to understand a proportion, trying to understand all these little details. For example, once you do notice that, you could play around with that. You know, you could create different looking faces, but just paying attention to that, and especially when you're drawing from real life. You know, these could be stylized, but when you're drawing from something from life and you're trying to capture the likeness of it, a lot of times people overlook that detail. So once you become aware of it, it really is in your scope of vision. You can adjust that. You could be like, oh, there's something a little bit off about it, or you could play around with it. But if you're unaware of it and you draw and you're feeling uncertain about it and you're like, it doesn't really look like the person, and not really knowing why, that I think is a lot more frustrating. So just wanted to demonstrate how keeping an eye out for that can really change things around. Well, ladies and gents, this is going to be it for the Drawing Comics stream. Not Drawing Comics, sorry. The figure drawing stream. I'm going to have to clip it here for the night. But I will be back in 5 minutes to do Coloring Comics, where I'm going to be coloring over John Buscema's Conan the Barbarian panels that I drew previously. For those of you who are just tuning in, it will be something like this. So stick around. I'll be back in 5 minutes. And for those of you who won't be able to make it to that stream, if you enjoy the content, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. They both help grow the stream, and will be greatly appreciated. All right, y'all. I'll see you in a little bit. Welcome, y'all. Welcome back to the stream, or welcome for the very first time to Art Lounge. This is the Drawing Comics stream. I am going to be continuing to color Conan the Barbarian. This is John Buscema's beautiful work. If you guys missed it, you don't know who John Buscema is, I highly encourage you to check out the highlights section on Twitch. I have a 5-minute video that I created talking about John Buscema, showing you guys some of his work, and just talking about his journey to becoming a Marvel artist and all of the contribution he made to creating a lot of the Marvel characters. It's a fun little 5-minute video, and it'll get you more familiar with John Buscema, as well as being able to see some drawings that aren't really mainstreamed. And as you guys could see, here are some panels that I've been doing over the period of the stream and off the stream. I'm gonna continue either inking or coloring, and I'm still debating on which one I should do. So far, I've been inking the colored panels. I decided to take a different approach to just see what the outcome of it is going to be like. You know, I noticed that watercoloring over inks tend to cover up detail that I really wanted to maintain. So I wanted to do it over pencils and then ink over that. But something interesting happens is once it dries, you still see the detail. So these few I've been doing prior to inking, and I guess these right here, these panels are over inks. So interesting enough, there are some parts there where it was really thick, where I laid it on pretty thick, and I covered up some detail, so you could see right here in his coat. There were some brush strokes there that were there, but got covered up. So the difference isn't really that big. It really depends on, like even here as well, it really depends on how you watercolor. You know, if you spend too much, if you put on too much water, or you put on way too much pigment, it could end up covering up some important detail you want to maintain. So what I will be doing is, let's see, which ones are there? There's this panel right here that I was working on. There are quite a few to ink. And I just realized it. I'm not as done with this sketchbook as I thought I was. I'm still going to be coming back to ink and color these panels. What should we do? What should I do here? Should I ink over this or start coloring a new panel? I'm going to try to do both. I'm going to try to ink, and I'm going to try to watercolor, or not watercolor, sorry, color pencil. I'm still in a color pencil phase, just because now I'm streaming less of the coloring comics. I used to do it 5 days a week. Now it's only restricted to 1. I got some other projects that I gotta attend to, so it really does get in the way of being able to stream more often. But hopefully in the near future, that's going to change. And you guys are going to see more of each of these streams. But they're getting substituted by interesting streams to make up for it. So every Thursday, once there are more people joining the Patreon page and joining the different tiers, on Thursday it's going to be the Kickstarter patron painting. So I'm going to be painting high resolution digital paintings of the patrons who pledged to that tier for 2 hours. So you guys are going to see that digital process, which is going to be fun. Should be interesting depending on what kind of costumes people end up creating, or what kind of portrait they end up sending me. That should be fun. And then on Fridays is going to be critique day. So for 2 hours, instead of having all these other regular streams that I've been doing, for 2 hours I'm going to be critiquing work that's being submitted to that tier. So it should be fun. You know, it's different ways you guys can get more involved and engaged during the stream. Should be fun. So I'm gonna have to go back a couple of pages for the sake of inking. Oh no. Give me 1 second, y'all. I gotta clean out this brush. It's pretty dry despite it actually making some lines. But it's gonna take me a minute. I'll be right back. Alright, with that done, I gotta make sure that it doesn't start bleeding everywhere. Oops. So I'm gonna have to dry this off. The importance of having a good rag around. And let's see. This page was used specifically for that. To make sure that it the excess water doesn't start ruining the image. And you can see it's kind of opaque. Still, the color isn't as dark as it should be. But the brush strokes are a lot smoother now. I believe it's time for for me to refill the pen with some ink. I recently did a little research on India ink, and I found out that it has like beetle parts in it, which I don't like. I really don't like having any animal based products. I think I don't find that to be right. To kill an animal so you could brush with its parts doesn't sound right at all. Especially nowadays where we could find so many alternatives to things. Yeah, the lines are still pretty thick. Still some water on there. But I did write the company and I asked them because India ink has those beetle parts in it, but Dr. P.H. Martin's India inks claim to have none of that. So I wrote to the company and I asked them, like, hey, do you actually have these parts in there? They say that there aren't any. Just want to confirm with them. Or I think their explanation was kind of vague. So I just wanted to make it a little bit more clear. I think also because I squeeze liquid down onto the brush, there's still ink that's traveling its way down to the tip. And then when it reaches it, it creates this like really thick line. Just trying to work that out of the brush, so I can go back to making very thin lines with it. So the goal is going to be to ink this page, or not page, rather this panel, and then move on to color pencils for a new panel. I'm trying to embrace a new challenge with this brush pen of keeping my distance from it and still achieving thin lines. I want to see if that's possible, because I feel like because the brush is so thick that when I tilt it, it starts to fan out more, making it difficult to create thin lines, but I'm trying to prove otherwise to myself, and that it's still possible. And I am noticing that the more I practice drawing at a distance, that it becomes more and more comfortable to keep that distance. Whereas before it felt like uncertainty, like I have no control over the lines, and only when I would get to the very tip of the pen would I start to feel like, okay, these lines are doable. I can actually make these really thin lines. So once again, practice makes perfect. Get far away from perfection when it comes to it, but little by little. And this is a good sign so far. I believe it's doable because when I was looking at how to draw comics the Marvel way with Stan Lee and John Buscema together, I was paying attention to like how John Buscema was creating his lines, and he was just using like a brush. Well, actually, no, he used like one of those hard nibs, like those metal nibs, and I think that lends itself to creating really thin lines. But he mixed it up. Like he had a brush that he used for inking, and he also used like that I want to say pen nib. But the challenge is to get really good at using this brush pen. And I think by getting really good at this, other tools become a lot easier as well. Because this is like the hardest form, I think, of inking. It's kind of like with music. If you learn to, or guitar rather, if you learn to play the acoustic, the electric is easier. So it's kind of like in that. I like to think of it in those terms. Like this is the acoustic version of drawing. Or inking rather. So if I get really good at that, then using other tools isn't going to be as challenging. And I could do even more with those tools. Like I think it really challenges your ability to have a steady hand and be really sensitive to like the tip of the brush to make sure that the lines actually do come out incredibly thin. Whereas like if you use a micron, it doesn't matter. You can press hard, you can press soft. It's going to just be very thin regardless. It kind of just like prevents you from learning that sensitivity and hand control over the pen. It's kind of also like playing hard mode in games, so that when you play any other difficulty prior to it, it's a breeze. I remember I was taking on that challenge with Ninja Gaiden back on the Xbox One, and it was a disaster. It was so frustrating because that game was difficult. As fun as it was incredibly difficult. And I remember just dying over and over and over again. And then at some point I was like, why am I doing this? I'm most likely not going to play all those other difficulties. But it was for the challenge, really. This is a lot better though. I mean, there are definitely benefits to going hard mode when it comes to drawing. I like this guy in the background. He has such a weird haircut. He has like those medieval strange haircuts where like there's just like a ring at the top of the head that's shaved off, or like a circle shaved off, and everything else around is kept. It's like a bowl cut, but then the top of it is shaved off. So bizarre. I recently stumbled on this Instagram post. It's like an archaeological archive kind of profile, and they post like all these different archaeological findings and images. And there was one that I recently saw of different styles, like hairstyles and hat styles during the 1400s from all different countries. So there would be one of like hairstyle in France in 1943. And then it'll be the same exact year, but in Germany and one in Italy. And you just get to see like what the hairstyles were, or like how do people wear hats and all that sort of thing back then. And it's really cool. It's interesting to see this transition from time to time. I ended up drawing this guy a little too happy. He does not look like that in the photo. I mean, in the panel. Trying to see if I could rescue that.
Don't stop. Let me explain something.
I think it's the nervousness that makes the hand slide down to the tip. It's like, oh no, I might screw this up. Let me get a little bit closer so I have more control over the lines. It's like the subconscious kind of like decision. And that's what gripping the pencil really tight is also about. Like whenever we tense up, we tend to like hold on to things even harder. This is funny reaction. I'd say it's somewhere on the level of like bracing for impact. You know, when you basically are holding on to something so that you don't fly off. And it's in that moment you're just like trying to gain control of something that can end up being disastrous. So I want to say the same thing kind of happens when people press hard on a pencil or like hold it close to the tip. It's just like this idea that the tighter you hold on to it, the more control you have over something. Which obviously isn't true when it comes to this, because you can have a lot of control over the pencil and you're barely pressing down on it or pressing onto the pencil. Botched it up. Damn. His ear is definitely not that pointy. And it isn't filled with black whatever. Doesn't cast that big of a shadow on itself. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I just cleaned this brush. It's still fighting off the water. Trying to really focus on how hard I'm pressing on the brush while it's at a distance. Man, time is flying. Feels like I just started the stream, but it's slowly coming to an end. I did have to start things a little bit later today. There was a bit of an issue that I ran into last night, actually. I have my camera attached to the wall, and the wall is incredibly brittle. And I just discovered today that it's a really old building, and what they used in order to create these walls was like this weird concoction of like horsehair and pigment, because when it fell out, right, like the attachment fell out, there was hair inside the wall. Like I looked through it, and it just like crumbled up, and there was hair also inside. It was so weird. And I spoke to some people, and they were like, oh yeah, and that's a common thing that people used to do like in the early 1900s. And that's why there's like hair in there. It's so bizarre. Talk about using animal parts. It's just so gross. But I ended up fixing it anyways. I did a little bit of tweaking and figured out a different way to attach it to the wall, and I'm glad it worked out. I really thought I would have to buy like new furniture basically in order to support it, because if I've attached to the desk and I make sort of like a racing or moving or whatever, it shakes the camera, and I don't want to do that. So thankfully I did some work today, and I was able to reattach it to the wall in a way where it's a pretty tight fit. So something good came out of having to start the stream a little bit later than usual. People tried all sorts of things back then, and I could say hands down this is a major failure. It doesn't hold up anything.
Trust me, I'll let you see. One thing's for sure, I'm helplessly in love. Can't lie about that. But what's the point if I can't give enough? Are you happy? Or are you saying you are for me? Don't need to be that way. If you trust me, I'll let you see. what's the point if I can't give enough? Are you happy? Or are you saying you are for me? Don't need to be that way. If you trust me, I'll let you see. One thing's for sure, I'm helplessly in love. Can't lie about that. But what's the point if I can't give enough? Are you happy? Or are you saying you are for me? Don't need to be
Well, ladies and gents, it is coming slowly to a close for the night. But I will be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on Twitch to do more drawing basics, and also I will be continuing on with the project stream. For those of you who haven't, check out the Patreon page, check out some of the tiers. There's some interesting ones there that I will be substituting on Thursdays and Fridays. So take a look and see if that's something that catches your eye. And if you have any questions, you can always ask right here on the stream, or just send me a message through any of the social media links posted on the Twitch channel, and I'll write you back and I'll talk about it in the stream. And with that said, ladies and gents, and with the last touch of inks for this panel, it seems like I'm pretty much done with it. I will wish y'all good night, and I'll see you very soon. Thanks for tuning in, y'all.